I love to get requests for videos, and this has been one that has been requested quite a few times. I just got another one today and I thought, okay, I'm gonna make this video now and explain my feelings on circumcision and my experience with it. I am wearing the same sweater that I wore for yesterday's video because I just got it, it's new, and I love it, and I don't want to take it off, so I'm not going to. So, circumcision. Where to start? This is going to be kind of conversational because I have a lot of experience with this and I have a lot to say about it, and so I'm just going to fly off the cuff and tell you what comes to mind, and hopefully this helps you make a very educated decision for yourself about circumcising your new little guy. I'll tell you from the start that 3 of my little boys are circumcised and 1 is not, and there's a reason for that. To get a little bit personal, I am in my second marriage. My first 3 sons are from my first marriage. My first husband and I didn't communicate very well. That is part of the reason why I divorced him. When it came to making the decision on circumcision, I was adamantly against it, and he was adamantly for it. His argument was that, of course, the cleanliness argument, which has now been disproven, by the way. He didn't want people making fun of them. He thought that it was kind of a norm, and because of that, they would feel inadequate and self-conscious with other boys in the gym locker room or with girls when they got older. Without kind of jumping ahead, I'm very angry at myself, and I do have that as a regret that I didn't put my foot down more. But that being said, my first son was circumcised. It was such a traumatic experience for me and for him, and this is being completely honest and sharing with you my innermost thoughts. But 16 months later, I had my second son, and I remember when I went in for the ultrasound to find out if it was a girl or boy. And when the ultrasound tech said it's a boy, I went from this ecstatic excitement that I was going to have another boy to this weighty kind of dread, because I knew that I was going to have to make that decision again, fight with my husband over it again, and possibly go through this whole experience again. Fast forward to our third son about 3 years later, and it was the same thing. I was so excited to have another boy, but I was terrified of having to get him circumcised. I think that says a lot, that right up there with being so excited about having a little boy was this dread of circumcision. I think some people might look at this decision very lightly and think, wow, that seems really kind of over dramatic, but I can honestly say, and I'll get into it more in a second, with my first son going through the circumcision experience, it is such a heavy decision. So my view on babies is that, they come out as these pure, precious, just safe and trusting little beings. You hold them and they're just exactly how you made them. They have been so safe and warm and loved and comfortable in your womb, and then they come out and this world is loud and bright, and there's all this stimulus that is scary. It's just so hard for me to think of these little guys getting hurt, even just getting their heel pricked. This is something they've never gone through before, and you just, as a mother, you just want to swoop them up and hold them and keep them safe from everything. And even with my 11-year-old, I'm still the same way with him, but I just want to keep him as safe as I possibly can. And with newborns, you just kind of covet that, and you just want to make sure that nothing happens to them. So here they are, and you're just in protective mode, and all of a sudden the nurse wants to come and take them away and cut off a piece of their body. Again, I know this sounds very dramatic, but it is what it is. I mean, you've made them so perfect intact the way they're supposed to be, and then all of a sudden, for aesthetic purposes, we're cutting off a piece of their body and putting them through pain just hours after they've been born. So that's the thought process that went through my head with my first son. The nurse comes and takes him away to get circumcised. And I went into complete panic mode. I can feel it in my heart right now. It makes me want to cry. I had never been away from him, and I never wanted to be away from him. And they took him away to cut off a piece of his body. It was horrendous. I remember when I got him back, I could tell he had been crying. His face was red and his eyes were all red. I looked down in his diaper and it was red and swollen and it looked so painful, and I could not believe that I allowed that to happen to my son. To be completely honest, to this day, I still can't believe that I did that. Now you can kind of understand why, when I found out I was having my second son, it was such a dread. But again, my husband said the same arguments he said with my first son, and then he said, well, we can't have our first son circumcised and then our second son not circumcised because they're gonna look at each other and be different and it's gonna be weird. And so we had our second son circumcised. Same exact situation. I was devastated. It was so traumatic and horrible. To make it even worse, they used a different procedure on my second son. I don't remember the names of the procedures or actually even really the kinds of the procedures, but one of them used a ring where it literally cut off the circulation to that part of their penis. It sounds horrific. My second son's procedure was really painstaking in the healing process. And it was red and swollen, and it was that way for like 2 weeks, and I could tell it hurt him terribly. It was awful. Fast forward again about 3 years, and I find out that I'm having my third son, and the same panic and dread ensued. We found a doctor in Denver who did the same procedure as my first, so it wasn't quite as traumatic in the healing process, but just as traumatic in the actual surgery itself. To give you my feelings, now being 11, 10, and 6 years removed from the experience, I can honestly tell you that not a day goes by that I don't regret those choices. I am one of those people that is very easygoing, and I like to look back on life and say, those choices were made for a reason, and I can't have regret or guilt based on those things if I learn from them. And yes, I did learn from them, but I feel like I didn't advocate enough for my sons. I put these little people, in my eyes, through a very traumatic experience very early on, taking a piece of their body that I did make for them, but I took a piece of their body off of them without their consent. I feel horrible about it, and I will always regret that decision. So that's me being completely open and honest with you on having my first 3 sons circumcised. They obviously don't seem traumatized by it. I'm sure they don't remember it at all. But if you've watched some of my other videos, you'll see that I feel it is extremely important with newborns to establish that safety, that comfort, and that trust from day one. As I'm here filming, my little 6-month-old is in the swing out with my husband, asleep. I have such an incredible trust with him that I can take him, and I know when he's tired, and I just put him in the swing or put him in bed, and he will just put himself to sleep happily, knowing that his needs are going to be met, knowing that he's safe and loved, because I have worked to establish that with them from the very beginning. But I feel like things like this hurt that trust. Now, I could very well be thinking too much into this. I am absolutely infatuated with my babies, with my children, and I spend a lot of time thinking about this because I am passionate about helping mamas have very secure and safe and happy babies, because I know that it creates secure and safe and happy, joyful children and adults. So fast forward more, and I divorced my first husband and met my soulmate, and we have incredible communication, and we're both very receptive to each other's needs and wants. So when I was pregnant with our first child together, our fourth child, I found out I was having a little girl, and I was ecstatic because I didn't think that I actually made girls. And obviously I didn't have to deal with the circumcision decision. But a couple years later, I found out I was having a little boy. And here is where our discussion opened. My husband was very open and receptive to what I told him about my feelings about circumcising. And he had never really actually sat down and thought about it. You know, it's something that's been so common in our society that I think little boys grew up thinking that their boys will just be circumcised, but I don't think they really give thought to the mechanics that are involved with the whole situation. When I explained my feeling about it and why, he was very open to making a decision to keep our son intact. I cannot tell you how grateful and happy I am that we were able to come to that decision together. So when my 3 oldest sons helped me change the diaper of our newest son, they of course each separately noticed that theirs looked a little different than his. I explained to him the process, and I explained to him what happened and why we chose not to. And that was all of it. I mean, they don't look at him differently. I could never imagine them ever making fun of him for looking different. I have known men that are uncircumcised. I don't know how this came up in discussion, but it did. And I can tell you that every man that I've met that I've had the circumcision discussion with, and these are adult men, have said that they have had no issues with being made fun of at school or with a lover or anything like that being disgusted or turned off by it. They've not had any negative issues associated with being uncircumcised. Some poor little boys, I'm sure, have been made uncomfortable for looking a little different. But that's what makes the world so beautiful, is that we are all different. I'm not really worried about that at all. I know that a lot of moms and dads out there, that is one of their main concerns. So I haven't done the research myself, but I have been told that most insurance companies are not paying for circumcision surgery anymore because it's not believed to hold any value over aesthetics. The whole cleanliness argument is invalid. This is something that you would be putting yourself through and your baby through for an aesthetics value. So I look at my newest son, Nico, who's 6 months old, and I think if down the line he feels like, from an aesthetic standpoint, he wants to get circumcised, then he absolutely can do that himself. And I'm fine with that. But I'm not going to make that decision for him, and I'm not going to put him through that. I'm glad that I made that decision. I'm really, really happy with that decision. This coming from a mama who's had experience with both. I can tell you that I regret circumcising my first 3 sons. I can tell you that it was an extremely traumatic experience for them and for me. No matter what anyone tells you, it's gonna hurt them. And no matter what anyone tells you, it's gonna hurt your heart to see them hurt. These little guys are so trusting, and you are their world. You are who they look to make the best decisions for them, because they can't do it for themselves. We can only go into these situations armed with the knowledge that we have available to us at the time. Just take into consideration all of this information and know that the more secure and comfortable your baby is, the happier they will be. And my best suggestion is to preserve that as best as you can, because it will emanate from them in everything that they do. I know this is a really challenging decision, and I empathize with you, especially for you mamas out there who have husbands who are adamant about getting your baby circumcised. I wholeheartedly empathize with you because I remember being there. It is a very challenging decision to make. I just hope that you guys have good enough communication to listen to each other and come to a conclusion that is best for your family. I hope you found this helpful. If you have, please subscribe and hit that notification bell, because I am going to be making these videos very often. And if you have any questions that I can answer either in the comments below, or if you'd like me to make a video on that subject, please go ahead and leave a comment and I would be happy to address that. And until next time, be well.